You know, every single time you look for a song, find a book in a library, or even just scroll through your social media feed, you're interacting with a system designed to organize information. But have you ever stopped to wonder who actually builds these things? Well, today, we're going to go inside the education of these information architects to see how they learn to bring order to the chaos of the world's knowledge. Seriously, think about that for a second. Millions of books, endless articles, just petabytes of data. It's a tidal wave of information. Behind every single Google search, every library catalog, there's a system that someone had to design. So who are these people, and how in the world do they even begin to turn all of this digital chaos into something we can actually find and use? Well, the answer is in this really powerful and kind of hidden field called cataloging and classification, or CNC for short. And no, this is not just about putting books on a shelf in the right order. It's the science of creating the logical frameworks, the actual blueprints that make all knowledge, from ancient texts to the latest viral video, findable for you and me. To really get a handle on how these crucial skills are taught, we're going to zoom in and look at a specific case study. We're putting the Library and Information Science, or LIS, programs in Bangladesh right under the microscope, all based on a really fascinating new study. Now, even though we're focusing on Bangladesh, let's be super clear. This is not some isolated issue. The research points out that universities all over the world are wrestling with the exact same problem. How do you keep this critical education up to date in an age where the digital world is changing every single day? And you know, this field actually has a pretty long history in the country. It all started with a simple certificate course way back in 1959. And as you can see, it just grew and grew over the decades, expanding into master's programs, new universities, which really shows you that there was a growing need for people with these very specific skills. Okay, so this brings us right to the research this whole explainer is based on. The researchers used this very systematic approach, which you can see in the flowchart here, called content analysis. They basically dug into the course syllabi from 4 major universities to get a really clear picture of what students are actually being taught. So after all that digging, what did they find? Let's step inside the LIS classroom and see what the next generation of information scientists are really learning. What's so interesting here is that the curriculum isn't just a list of topics. It's more like a complex web of interconnected ideas. I mean, look at this map. It all branches out from the big picture LIS curriculum, then dives down into very specific skills like descriptive cataloging and the really crucial art of subject analysis. It's all about balancing the big ideas with the hands-on practice. And that balancing act between theory and practice is key. So on one hand, students are tackling these huge abstract ideas like the universe of knowledge. But on the other hand, they're getting their hands dirty with practical, real-world tools like the Dewey Decimal System, yep, the numbers on library books, and something called MARC format, which is basically the universal language for digital library records. And the goals here? They're crystal clear. It's all about making sure that when these students graduate, they can organize anything, whether it's an ancient manuscript or a brand new digital file. The whole curriculum is designed to give them a complete toolkit for the job. But, and this is a big but, here's where the story takes a really interesting turn. It's one thing to have these courses on the books, right? But how much importance do these universities actually place on them in the grand scheme of a whole degree? The researchers asked a really simple but powerful question. Over a student's entire 4-year education, what percentage of their total time is actually spent learning these foundational CNC skills? And the answer? Well, it varied. A lot. This chart just lays it all out. I mean, look at the difference here. The University of Dhaka dedicates a pretty solid 16.66% of its program to CNC. But then you look over at Rajshahi University, and it's just 8.33%. That is barely half as much focus on the exact same course subject. Let's just sit with that number for a second. 8.33%. For what is supposed to be a fundamental bedrock skill for this entire profession, one of the country's major programs dedicates less than 1/10 of its total curriculum to it. That's a huge difference. The study itself puts it pretty bluntly. It found a significant variance. And what that really suggests is that there's no national standard here. It could mean that new graduates are walking into the workforce with wildly different levels of skill in this one area that's supposed to be absolutely essential. So what's the fix? Well, the great thing is the research doesn't just point out the problem. It actually lays out a very clear 5-step path forward to build a much stronger foundation for CNC education. And the recommendations are super direct. First up, Increase the credit hours. Simple. Give this subject the time it deserves. Second, bring in the new tech. Teach students about metadata standards, which are kind of like the digital ID tags for every file online. Third, more hands-on training through things like internships. Fourth, you've got to keep the curriculum fresh and updated. And finally, you have to invest in the teachers themselves so they can keep their own skills sharp. And the end goal of all of this is actually pretty simple. It's to create skilled professionals who are ready and able to handle a country's changing information needs in this crazy digital age. It's about building a workforce that's truly prepared for the challenges of tomorrow. Which leaves us with one last and I think really crucial question. In a world where the amount of data is just exploding, it's growing exponentially, the education of the people who have to organize it all has never been more important. This isn't just some academic debate. This is about who we are trusting to build the libraries, the databases, and the digital archives, the very foundations of how we'll access knowledge in the future.